Welcome to the People Pleaser podcast. I am your host, Corie, and I'm so happy you're here. Thanks for joining. I didn't think I'd come on tonight and record, but here I am. It's daylight savings, and so the clock's changed tonight, and I'm like, I could get in bed right now, and then I have to keep remembering that the clock's changed the other way. So I don't know, my energy is just low, and so I'm just on the couch, and I wanted to share some news with you that this week I started the trauma of money. And I'm not going to do a very good job of explaining what the trauma of money is. I really just recommend that you check it out for yourself. But essentially, it's a 16-week course where you begin to examine your money traumas. And that is where I want to start the conversation tonight, is around money. And not necessarily my money traumas, but where my relationship with money and my people pleasing intersects. And so I don't know if this would be a good time to say just a brief content warning that I will be talking about finances, and I know that can be a really stressful topic, so just make sure you're listening to this at the right time of day. Maybe just decide that today's not the day that you want to listen to it, and just listen to what your body's needing. But I do hope that it's a valuable conversation. So, let's dig in. Honestly, where do I even begin? Where I want to begin is like my very first memory of having my own money and spending it. And so growing up, I had an allowance, and I have very little memory of like how I used that money. But I do know that I earned an allowance based on, I think it never was taken away from me, but there was an expectation that I would help around the house with chores and things like that. And I remember this time where I was, becoming more and more independent, and where we lived at the time was close to a mall, and in that mall had a dollar store, and really the only things I could afford with my money, unless I saved, but we'll get into that later. I could only afford something at the dollar store. So, of course, I'm still learning how to use money. I don't really understand the concept. I don't really understand the worth, like the value of things. I just know that I would have money and then I wouldn't have money. And the example that really is in my mind right now is going to this dollar store and buying these bracelets. And these were bracelets that I had seen other kids wearing. And they were essentially like a giant spring. Or not a giant spring, like a long spring that would go around your wrist like a bracelet, but a very actually tiny spring. And I remember giving the woman, the cashier, my money, and just being horrified at like how little money I got back. And then I tried to like just move past that and just kind of be like, okay, whatever. At least I have these bracelets. And then, so I walk out of the store, I rip open the package, I put these spring bracelets are on my wrist, and they immediately start pulling my arm hair. And I am just like gutted, so disappointed in my purchase, so disappointed that all my money was gone, and just feeling like, well, I guess now I'm stuck with this, and that is just like lesson learned. And I say lesson learned, but just last week, so what is this, like 30 years later? Just last week, I had such a similar experience, or an experience that has similarities, anyways. It was my grandfather's birthday, and he's been in the hospital. And so we had a little birthday celebration for him at the hospital. And, it's hard to know. Like, he's turning 89, he's in the hospital. There's lots of things that he can't really have in that setting. And so I kind of had this moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how fun would it be to just get him some, like, really fun helium balloons? Like, I've actually never bought someone like a bouquet of helium balloons. And I just kind of thought that's sort of like, that's a fun idea. He doesn't really need anything. It's just to be really like, just to make a bit of a splash and make him feel special. So I look up online where to buy helium balloons, because I didn't even really know where in my city you can find them. And I went to the store, and it's kind of like an everything store, but they have a party section. And so I went, and I was like, oh my God, they have so many helium balloons to choose from. So I decided to pick out like a few different kinds. I found a package of these two really big balloons, and they were filled with confetti. So that was really exciting. And then I got a Mylar, like, that crinkle, like shiny balloon that said like happy birthday on it. And then I wanted to fill it up with just some like regular helium balloons. And I think I picked out some like metallic ones. So I go up to the till, and I knew that the two confetti balloons were $8.99 for the two, and everything seemed very reasonable. And the attendant begins to fill my balloons, and the first thing she does is she opens up the package of two confetti balloons, and she has filled one, and it's like amazing. And I'm just like, oh, this is so cool. She fills it all the way up, and she's tying it. And just as she's tied it, she says, oh, and just so you know, these cost $11.99 each to fill, the big ones. And I'm like, what? Like, instant panic mode, like instant, like, oh my God, I'm in over my head. So that meant that like I was going to spend $8.99 on these two balloons plus $11.99 each. So each balloon truly was costing $20. A $20 balloon and a $20 balloon. And then I had all these other balloons. And so I immediately just kind of like swallow my feelings, and I just tell her to go ahead with it. And so as she's going ahead with it, I start like putting some of the other balloons away, because I'm like, oh my God, this is getting really out of hand. So the bouquet, this big bouquet of balloons that I wanted, actually only had 5 balloons. Like, not at all the vision I had. I was thinking like this big, robust, like over the top bouquet, but it had 5 balloons, and it cost over $50. And I walked out of there just feeling like I should have just told her no. I should have just said, whoa, 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 $11.99? No. And honestly, like, the price of it was a huge consideration. Like, without going fully into my like budgeting, like debt-free, like all these financial goals that I have going on right now. But I am really trying to be mindful of my spending. And so that was one piece. But truly, I will tell you, like, truly, my mind was so caught up on the fact that I didn't want to make her feel bad. I didn't want her to feel guilty that she didn't tell me like before she started to fill the balloons. I didn't want her to get in trouble for like me saying like, okay, well then I don't want the balloons anymore. And then she has like that to reckon with, like, the open package, the one balloon. I was just like, yeah, like I didn't want to be that customer. I didn't want to be the customer making a fuss, being, like oppositional. And so there was the people pleasing at play, like big time. And there was this like undeniable feeling of shame. I felt so ashamed that I would come across as like not being able to afford it and being like, frugal or whatever, like whatever you want to call that. And like the truth is I can afford it, but I also like I was having a real moral dilemma because I'm like, I want to give my grandfather these balloons. That is at the center of this. I still want to give him the balloons. Like, I don't care about the price when I think of him. But when I think about like consumerism, capitalism, like the fact that, these gestures that used to be like, I don't know, I just thought that giving helium balloons was like a relatively accessible thing to do, was just filled with so many moral like dilemmas, so many triggers. And I went out of there, like I went into the store feeling like so excited about my like fun little plan, and I left the store with like that sinking gut feeling. And as soon as I got to the hospital, this is just an aside, but as soon as I got to the hospital, I pulled up their website because I'm like, oh yeah, like people are allergic to what are balloons made out of? Wow, latex. So then I got all paranoid, like, oh my God, like are these even allowed in the hospitals? Because I know like certain flowers, like lilies, aren't allowed in the hospital because of how scented they are and people have allergies. Anyways, I pulled up the website and it says that they don't allow latex balloons in the hospital. And before you start feeling like really, really bad for me, please don't. We did get around it. We were able to ask the nurses station and they had no problem with it at all. But it was just like, I don't know, just that whole situation just felt like so loaded, just so loaded with emotions, with like rules, restrictions, like these kind of societal expectations. And I was just like barely afloat throughout all of that. And, to no fault of my mom, when I told her how much the balloons cost, her response was like, why did you spend that money? And to no fault of my husband, when I told him how much the balloons cost, he said, why did you spend that money? And, like, these are people looking out for me and my well-being. And it's also like kind of calling me out, or maybe we could rephrase that as calling me in to these people pleasing. Like, this is people pleasing. This is poor boundaries. This is like just not standing up for myself. This is not speaking my truth. This is just like swallowing. And there will be moments where things are expensive and I have the privilege, truly, like I do, to be like, that was like way overpriced, but here we are. And I know not everybody can say that, but I am in a position to purchase my grandfather these balloons. And I also can take from that situation that it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good. And so for me, that is just one example of like how people pleasing and my finances really do play into another. And, what can I even say about money other than it's such a deeply personal, like deeply entrenched relationship. The narratives we have around money are so embedded in how we were raised and what our parents' relationship with money was, what our society's relationship with money is. Like, I live in North America. We are in the thick of capitalism. Like it runs the show. Like, and so that's what I'm really excited to explore deeper within trauma of money, because they actually take, from what it sounds like at this stage anyways, they take the responsibility away from the person and they put it back on like the systems. And, if you think about us, like, how do we live in a world outside of capitalism? Like, I know it exists, but doing that where I live would be taking some very extreme measures that I'm not equipped to take, not at this stage anyways. And the more I think about my relationship with money, I will say that in the last 2 years, so the last 2 years, January 2022 to January 2024, I paid off over 20 grand of consumer debt. Not student loans, not car loans, not mortgage, like, and no shade. Like, I'm not shaming anyone. I'm especially not shaming myself, but it's to paint the picture that, like, I had over $20,000 of just debt from buying things. And it's hard for me to share this next story because it's both a story that feels emotional and like sad, and there's like embarrassment and shame, and it also is like one of my proudest stories. So during the pandemic, so in 2020, I started an online thrift store. And I started this while I was in a relationship that was very harmful to me. And I will talk about that relationship in another podcast at another time. But the emotional climate, my emotional well-being was very taxed at this time. And so I found a huge amount of joy in starting an online thrift store. And I would say that the community I built, the creative pursuit that I was playing with, like, there was so much success. There was so much that I look back so fondly, and honestly, there is not a month that goes by where I'm like, should I start it again? Like, there's a real fondness to those times. And the business model was reselling. So buying thrifted items and reselling them. And there was definitely a moral dilemma at play. So I'm just going to put that out there without speaking to it right now. But even though I was upselling, so buying the items and then selling them for more, I accrued so much debt because the model that I created didn't guarantee that I was going to sell all my product. And I was doing like between 1 and 2 like drops, like sales per week. So I was constantly buying new product and putting it out. And then any product that didn't sell, I would try to sell it on other platforms, but I would essentially end up redonating it to their thrift stores. So like basically buying things to just return them without, getting my money back. And on top of that, because there was this moral dilemma of like buying things from thrift stores and then, reselling them, I was always so reluctant to like raise the price too much. And I wanted things to be accessible still. And I couldn't like justify just totally jacking up the price. So then, I'm only making like a couple bucks for all the effort. There was so much work that I was not accounting for in the ticket price of the items. All the promotion I was doing, all of the sourcing I was doing, all the communications with customers, all like taking photos of all the product, taking video, like, keeping an inventory, all of these things. So not only was I not selling everything, then the prices I was marking them up to really wasn't enough to like make much of a difference. And then on top of that, I was offering to like ship and deliver. And I would have customers who were like regular customers that would ask for local delivery. And I had it on my website that like, there was like a $5 range, a $10 range, and a $15 range for places I would deliver. But as soon as you became like a regular customer, I'm like, oh, like I don't want to charge them the delivery fee. They're so generous in supporting my small business that I want to give that to them for free. So then we're talking like fuel costs, mileage costs. Like I'm just not doing myself any favors, like truly. And truly, the thing that I really got out of it, and this is priceless, was the community, were the friends. But I became so deeply entrenched in debt. And I'm not saying that my 20 grand was all from this thrift shop, but it got me rolling. I'll just put it that way. So again, tying this into people pleasing, like, I wasn't financially literate enough to really know what I was doing. But because I also created a business around like making friends and like community, that just like triggered my people pleasing. It was just like, friends, all right, here we go. Discounts for everyone. And like, I know that must be something that small business owners come up against all the time. And so my wake up call was one day I was shipping a package to Vancouver. So that's, a very close city here, but you have to ship things there. And a friend of mine was, buying from me. This was actually a friend of mine, not from just the shop, but a friend in real life. And I rang up the cost of what shipping would be, and it was like disgusting. Like for how short of a distance it was going, it was like $20 or something like that. And I just like couldn't justify tacking on $20 to like their like $14 item. So I said, shipping's on me. And my friend came back and told me, Corie, no. If you don't let me pay for my own shipping, then you are essentially paying me $6 because the item is 14, the shipping is 20, or whatever the math is. But you know what I'm saying. In my mind, the math is $6. But so you know what I'm saying. Like the shipping, or maybe it's 4. The shipping was more money than the item. And this was my friend. This is my friend who fully knew that they were asking for shipping. When you ask for shipping, you have to understand that I myself am not coming up with those prices. Like those are what the post office are creating. So again, This was a big wake up call for me to be like, oh my God, how will I run a successful business if I am basically throwing my money away because I'm just trying to like make people happy, not inconvenience anyone. I want to take everyone else's financial stress away, but here I am just like steeped in my own. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I just knew what I was doing wasn't sustainable, but I didn't really know how to show up in that space any other way, especially after I had created these expectations, these low prices, these free deliveries, and I mean, the thrift shops must have also loved me because here I am buying all their product and then just giving them it back for free. So, yeah, I mean, in general terms, I think people pleasing has shown up in my relationship with money in a lot of different ways. And I would say like treating someone for coffee when I'm like, ugh, I really don't have like a ton of money. Or if someone's like, hey, lunch is on me. And I'm like, no, 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 I'll get it. And then they're like, no, 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 I'll get it. And then I'm like, no, I'll get it. Like bullying them out of their kind gesture because I'm like trying to care for them while they're trying to care for me. But I want to care more and I want to care the most. And then, like, well, how does that leave them feeling? Right? Like, oh, I was just trying to do a nice thing. And now I kind of feel like a jerk because now you're paying for my meal. So clearly, this is a passionate subject for me. I feel like I've been on a real tear with this one. But money, like, it is so complicated, our relationship with it. Yeah. I can't think of a time where money has been easy. It it has always felt stressful. And then you attach humans to it. Oh boy. But I do have a lot of pride. I'm very proud of myself for beginning to recognize some of my financial patterns, and I want to start viewing my finances from more of a people pleasing lens. Like, I am actually getting a lot better at tracking my monthly spending. So, can you look at your monthly expenses and look at like, huh, what, like, what was this? For some of us, myself included, we can really pick out like, oh yeah, I was having a bad day. I was, self-soothing with that purchase. I was, the whole retail therapy. And, I just, if I'm going to do it and if I'm going to encourage you to do it, I'm encouraging the approach of curiosity. Certainly not shame, certainly not judgment. Our society, the world does that to us enough. We don't need to do that to ourselves. But just, yeah, like, interesting. That purchase there, that kind of put me in the red zone. That made, blood pressure rise, armpits sweat. Asking ourselves, why are we making these purchases? Was this for outward validation? Was this to control a situation? Did you take someone's, kind of sparkle or hope to treat you or to please you or to, gift you away? Yeah. So I feel like this will be a conversation I revisit, especially as I dive deeper into the trauma of money. I'm really excited to share some of my takeaways from that course, and I know a lot is already bubbling up for me, and it's only week 1, so I can only imagine Corie on week 16. So I will link the Trauma of Money website in the show notes, just if you want to take a little gander. And yeah, I think it's now a somewhat appropriate time for me to get into bed. So I'm going to end it there. So thank you for listening once again. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe. I love you. I'd love you for it. I'd love you anyways. So thanks, everyone. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.